It's alright.
Oh my god!
Yo guys, what is up? Max on Borderlands 3 video, and today we're going over the top 5 things Borderlands 3 did wrong. Now, before we get into this video, I want to talk about why I'm making this, because this could seem as like a hatred video or a toxic video. Trust me, it is none of those. I play Borderlands 3 literally every day. I love this game, but it did some things wrong, and I want to talk about them because we have Wonderlands on the horizon, and I'm hoping that these are mistakes that Wonderlands will not repeat. That is the big point of today's video, is I want to point out things that Gearbox could learn from to improve on Wonderlands. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let's do this. So my first point in the top 5 things that Borderlands 3 did wrong that I hope they remedy in Wonderlands is it launched with no endgame content. There was no endgame content in Borderlands 3 at launch. The best endgame content that we had was doing Slaughter Shaft for world drops, or killing Grave Ward for world drops, or doing Proving Grounds for world drops. There was no dedicated loot. There was no endgame raid boss. And in comparison to Borderlands 2, which came out years before launching with Terramorphous, one of my fondest memories of Borderlands 2 was watching people fight Terramorphous for the first time and struggling on it for hours. The DLC that Borderlands 2 got, Commander Lilith, that came out years after the game launched, had a raid boss in it, and somehow Borderlands 3 did not launch with one. I thought this was extremely frustrating, and I hope they understand the importance of endgames and raid bosses to the Borderlands franchise, so that when Wonderlands launches, it launches with a solid endgame, whether that be through dungeons or raid bosses, whatever they're planning on doing. I think that's super important for the players that get through the game quickly, that want to test their builds on more difficult content and want higher tiered loot to chase after. The next thing that Borderlands 3 did wrong that I hope they remedy in Wonderlands is Mayhem Modifiers and Mayhem scaling. Now, Mayhem Modifiers on launch were kind of a mess. They had hard positives and hard negatives against your character, like plus 25% SMG damage, but like minus 50% assault rifle damage. This led to unfun gameplay mechanics because it wasn't fun to just lose damage or gain damage that wasn't interactive. This was supposedly remedied with the Mayhem 2.0 rework. Now, there's some things here. I do like the Mayhem system. I like playing on Mayhem 11. I like the challenge and I like the scaling. However, Mayhem 10 modifiers prior to Mayhem 11 were in a really rough spot with just how annoying they were. They turned from being these like idea of like wacky fun modifiers to just being mainly frustrations to players, things that were just not fun to play against, and I know lost a lot of interest for players. Now, when we launch into Wonderlands, there is going to be some sort of endgame and endgame scaling. I'm assuming we had the OP modifiers, or the OP system in Borderlands 2. Borderlands 3 had Mayhem modifiers. 1 had crazy ridiculous scaling and you couldn't kill anything with slag. Borderlands 3 had really ridiculous modifiers, but besides the modifiers, I think they did better on the scaling. I think they did better on the ways to work up through the Mayhems than the OP system. So I'm hoping they take what they learned from Mayhem 11, remove the modifiers, at least in my opinion. I don't think we need modifiers, and just give us straight scaling, because it was a big headache for a lot of players when this system first launched. Next up on the list of things that Borderlands 3 did wrong that I hope they remedy in Wonderlands is the abundance of legendaries and the anoint system. Now, these kind of go hand in hand. At launch, legendaries dropped everywhere, but they didn't matter if they had a bad anoint on them. The anoints were more important than the legendaries, which took away from the special feeling of getting a legendary. But because anoints were so important and there were so many anoints, legendaries needed to drop like crazy in order for you to get the right weapon with the right anoint. Think about farming a monarch with consecutive hits in elemental. It was a ridiculous farm, and you would see so many monarchs by the time that you got the monarch that you wanted, that by the time you finally got that monarch, it didn't really feel so special because you had already seen 50 monarchs that you basically had to throw away just because of this one anoint that you really needed. So the anoint system being so important, even more important than the legendary, I think was a big issue. Now, in Wonderlands, the gameplay reveal, we've already seen that there looks like an anointed beam. So I really want to stress this point that I hope that the Legendaries take priority in Wonderlands. They did remedy this a little bit with the anoint reroll machine, but simply put, anoints in Borderlands 3 are too powerful. It shouldn't be 200 splash damage or 125 splash damage, 100 increased weapon damage. I think anoints or enchants, whatever they're going to be in Wonderlands, should be more focused on utility or small min-maxing damage boosts that are not necessary for the weapon to be good, but maybe a slight additional reward on the weapon if you get it with that anoint or can attach that anoint to it. However it's going to work, I really don't think anoints need to be super forefront because it takes away from how good getting a legendary feels. Next up in the top 5 things Borderlands 3 did wrong is DLCs with no endgame. Now, I thought the DLCs in Borderlands 3 were really great. 1 through 4 were really awesome, and 5 and 6 introduced some new things to mess around with, and in 6 we finally got our first standalone raid boss, but it took 6 DLCs to get there. 1 through 4, amazing campaigns, but with campaign DLCs, I feel like you need to have some sort of endgame activity, some sort of endgame boss, an endgame slaughter shaft, an endgame slaughter star, something that once you beat the campaign, there is an activity to go grind, to go farm in, because DLCs 1 through 4 and even 5 launched with no endgame, no raid bosses, no takedowns, nowhere to test your builds. We would get crazy weapons and crazy power crept guns, but no real new place or new difficult thing to test them against. Now, in DLC 2, we did get some difficult bosses with Ista. In DLC 4, we got the Psycho Reaver, and these were difficult bosses, and I definitely liked that they upped the difficulty from, like, for example, DLC 1, which was every enemy in DLC 1 was kind of a cakewalk, but increasing difficulty of DLCs and also adding endgame content to them, I think is really important for the longevity of a game like Borderlands 3 that is so focused on like endgame and power fantasy. So that was my next point. And my last point in the top 5 things Borderlands 3 did wrong that I'm hoping they fix in Wonderlands is the campaign. Now, I know some people didn't like some of the characters in the campaign, some of the things that happened, or some of the villains. I'm not here to tell Gearbox how to write a good story or a good villain. I know nothing about that myself. But what I can talk about from my experience is someone who plays through the campaign multiple times to get multiple characters leveled. In Borderlands 3, we have 4 characters, meaning at minimum, you're going to need to play through the campaign 4 times. In Wonderlands, there are 6 classes, meaning that you're going to play through this campaign at minimum 6 times. And when you play through a campaign 6 times, things like long cutscenes, dialogues, slow areas, they start to stick out more and you notice them more versus something in a game where you only play through the campaign once and then you're done with it. And so to speak more knowledgeably about this and to get some other opinions, I reached out to Joltzdude and Ki11erSix, who I know have done Allegiance runs and things like that, which I don't really do in Borderlands. And I asked them if they could fix one thing in Borderlands 3's campaign, or if they could give advice to Gearbox on making the Wonderlands campaign, what would they do? And I got some phenomenal answers, so I wanted to share them with you guys. Ki11erSix's biggest thing was wanting a skip dialogue or a fast forward story, something to skip through this story. I think after completing it on one character would be really interesting to see, and also a dialogue skip option. And then Schultz had some amazing points to make as well, basically talking about the pacing of the gameplay, because once you're on your second or third character, you're not really there for the story. You're there to get through the end game, and you get stuck behind dialogue walls, which slow down gameplay and make players lose interest. Schultz also mentioned having dialogue be more fluid, and if you knew where you needed to go, you could just go to the next waypoint and not have to wait for the dialogue to play all the way through before the next waypoint showed up or before it activated, so that you could have a more like natural dialogue skip. I think this is an amazing idea. I will have the links to both Joltzdude and Ki11erSix in the description. Guys, that is it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. I wanted to talk about these things because Wonderlands is still a little bit away. 6 months isn't a ton of time, but we do have time to voice our opinions about things that we didn't like in Borderlands 3 in hopes that they'll fix them in Wonderlands. I think now is the best time possible that we can start talking about these things and opening up discussions so that we can share what we like and what we don't like in hopes that they make it into Wonderlands before release. Guys, that is it for the video. I will catch y'all in the next one. Take care, guys. Peace.